Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Potter Richard. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Potter Richard have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Potter Richard are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Potter Richard website at potterrange.co.uk/liberal-democrats. Now, on with the podcast.
It's an incredible privilege to represent your hometown where I was born and brought up, went to school, and so on. And as you know, there's not a day I don't walk in across the Lambeth Bridge and towards the palace and think, Jamie Stone, you are a lucky lad.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter and joining me from Liverpool is Richard Kemp. But our guest today, our very, very special guest, is sometimes a pantomime dame, always an excellent MP, and also has a legion of social media followers called the Stoners. We would welcome Jamie Stone, MP, to the podcast. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello. I'm very happy to join you. Nice to see you all.
And you're in Westminster at the moment. Can you just tell us a little bit what's it like at Westminster? You're obviously Parliament's kicked back in after the recess. How's life for you at the moment?
It's completely different. I mean, it really is. Even queuing up to get my breakfast today, the social distancing is enforced rigorously. You are, you have to sanitize and so on. And it's slightly more muted, should we put it that way. But as we know from the press, the sparse chamber does not suit Boris one little bit. And it really has changed the whole dynamic of the place. It's quite interesting. That sort of, Hogwarts on Thames feel has gone. I think maybe that'll lead us to weigh up how important is that to British democracy, or could we do things differently? We're on a learning curve here.
Now, I remember when MPs came back, you were in the press quite a lot because you're a carer. As well. And do you think now all that kind of progression has changed in Parliament? Do you think they'll ever go back to using virtual means, or do you think that's just done with now? It was a necessity and they won't ever change?
Well, yeah. I mean, I got really mixed up in this issue because I am my wife Flora's carer, and during the height of the pandemic, we didn't have any help. People would come in because the service was overstretched. So it was inconceivable for me to go or come down here to Westminster because who was going to go after my wife? Because there are certain things that she can't do, like tie up her shoes or whatever. And so it was all right to begin with when it was virtual, and I could contribute, make a speech, ask a question, and I did that. And then Jacob Rees-Mogg said, actually, if you want to vote, you're going to have to physically be here. And that was when it let the blue touch base with me. And I said, you must be joking. Are you seriously going to deprive me of my right to vote? Are you going to deprive my constituents of the right to have me vote whatever would be best for them? And I was very grateful to the media, which actually came in behind me. And some surprising journalists, of a non-sympathetic Lib Dem said, actually, he's got a point. And so in the end, Jacob Rees-Mogg's Leader of the House had to climb down and say, actually, we will allow people who are in Jamie's position to continue to vote. And I did thank him for that. I went on the record in a Zoom, contribution to Westminster. But what I really hope, the point about this is that during mass shift, we saw people being taken out of hospital beds and taken to the Commons to vote. That was disgusting. And I hope now that in a small way, what I said and did has changed that for the years to come. So never again will this have to happen in the future. And if an MP or indeed a member of the Scottish Parliament or a member of the Welsh Assembly or even a councillor is in extremis and cannot vote for, they will then have the ability to do it online. And I hope that sticks for the rest of time, as long as there's democracy in our good country.
I'm not quite sure whether I like the phrase "or even a councillor," because I think we can't Parliament. But just picking up the general point, I was very excited yesterday. I bought my first ticket to London since the beginning of March, and I chair something, and I've laid down, I took a high-handed decision that our meetings will always be hybrid in future, because we have people coming from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Newcastle. There's only a dozen of us, and some people are spending something like 5 times as much time travelling as they are at the meeting. So my view is the chairman always needs to be there, and anyone that can get there, but all the rest should be able to properly contribute to this without spending an entire day and 300 quid coming down to London. And I just hope that will evolve. But Jamie, this also is your constituency. I think your constituency is almost as big as the trip to London, isn't it? What's this telling you about being an MP in a very, very rural area? Is that going to be different?
Yeah, I think so. What I did during the height of the pandemic was do everything obviously online. But in August, at long last, I then was able to get in my car and travel very long distances to the northwest of the UK, Cape Wrath. The top left and the top right-hand corners of the mainland of the UK are in my constituency. And what was interesting was the real enthusiasm that people had, saying, "Oh, it's you, it's the real you. We're so pleased to see you." Mm. And so maybe that told me that you can't do everything virtually, or because human interaction is so important. But yes, I think that, last week I had to change train, let me get this right, 3 times to get to Westminster, from the Highlands to Inverness, from Inverness to Perth to Edinburgh, and then Edinburgh to London. So I was a long time on the train. So the ability to zoom in would have been handy. And what I was always at pains to point out to Jacob Rees-Mogg was that, it's not as if I would want to zoom in when I'm in Tesco's or playing golf. I think you'd have to have rules about that. I completely appreciate that. But I like very much what you're saying about the council. That's absolutely right. It's spot on. And I think in the Highland Council, I was a councillor until 3 years ago. We're moving towards that. And luckily the technology seems to have got so much better these days that it is really good.
Yeah. So it's exciting times. So we can learn the good things from the pandemic, can't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's what is facing about the pandemic is, I don't know what you think, but it seems to me to have, in some cases, brought the worst out in people, which is sad. But also, it's amazing how some people have really risen to the occasion and have done amazing things, and not just the care staff. I think of people, various plumbers. If something goes wrong, that plumber's going to mask up and come in, and they did it even at the height, in early April, at some perceived risk to themselves. And there was an element of courage there, which was actually pretty inspirational. And it's not fair to name certain politicians, but we can all imagine some who did better than others in how they dealt with it. And that's probably a facet of human nature. Some people are stronger than others, and those who got more scared shouldn't be condemned for it, because it's totally understandable.
Yeah.
And for listeners and viewers that don't know, obviously Jamie is the MP for Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross, it's right in the northernmost mainland constituency in the UK. But also, what it came about, obviously you've been the defence spokesman for some time, but now have digital culture, media and sport as well. So how did that conversation go with Ed last week when he said, "Actually, I want to give you another brief"? How did that go?
Well, it was mid a train change last week, and I'd got off at Inverness station from the Highlands, from Tane in the Highlands, where Glenmorangie is made. That's where I live. And
I live near Penny Lane, if we're talking big names, Jamie. John hasn't got anything to offer to this conversation.
Not really. No.
But I stepped out of the station square. There's a big statue of a Highland soldier in his kilt. It's all about those who were killed in the Sudan towards the end of the the time of Kitchener. And suddenly there's the moment, it's Ed. And I thought, oh, right, what's good? My son had sent me a text saying, "Dad, reshuffle probably. Will you be in charge of stationery?" Well, you know,
I'm
it was
having a
Ed.
supportive family.
I know. Well, they take the mickey out of me, quite right too. And then he said, "Yeah, I'd like to do defence." And I said, "Well, Ed, whatever suits. I'll just, I'm extremely lucky to be an MP at all, because 3 years ago I genuinely didn't expect to be elected. I'll return to that in a second." And he said, "I'd like you to do DCM, Digital Culture, Media and Sport." At which point my jaw sagged, and I think people in Station Square and Inverness must have thought, "What's wrong with that guy? He's looking a bit, And I said, "Goodness me, well, yes, okay, sure, I think gracious." So, and I regard it actually as a great challenge. Defence is fascinating, and I think with defence you need a bit of continuity in some ways, because only that way do you learn how things work. But it's fun to have this new one, and it is relevant to me as a constituency MP, because just think digital broadband is very dodgy in parts of my constituency, and that's a huge issue locally. And just what I was going to say was about being elected 3 years ago. It was generally thought, because the SNP, Special National Party, a big majority, I wouldn't make it. I think we all thought that, including my agent, me, everyone. So when I won, I was completely flabbergasted. What was fascinating is the story of HQ in London, Lib Dem HQ, and the top of the map at 4 a.m, suddenly a great chunk of Britain went orange. And they all cheered and said, "Yeah, amazing." And they all said, "Who the hell is Jamie Stone? We've never heard of him."
Yeah.
What have we let ourselves in for?
I know. Well, I think Alistair Carmichael, the Chief Whip, knew my reputation from the Scottish Parliament as a sort of jokey member. So there's a nervousness. I'd roar around setting off all the fire extinguishers.
Yeah. There is a similar story about one of your predecessors who was a lord who became an MP. And he was an independent councillor. I think it was the Highlands Council at the time. He joined, and he was chair of it. And he joined the Liberal Party, I think we were still then. And the headlines went up, "Liberals take control of Highlands Council," with the one person on it.
That's absolutely correct. That was John Farquhar Munro.
That's right, yes.
Yes, it was John Farquhar, who was a much loved person, a Gaelic speaker, good friend of Charles Kennedy's, quite a man. I remember once, can I have our time for an anecdote?
Yeah.
Anytime. We live for anecdotes.
I used to be a member of the Scottish Parliament for 12 years. I stood down, and by the way, after that, in 2015, our party was trashed in the general, and I was really felt, oh my God, So that was kind of why I thought I would stand for the council again, because I didn't want to see my old ward. And I thought I had to do my bit for the party, and that's how I went full circle. Anyway, that's by the by. Myself and John Farquhar Munro are having a meeting in the summer with the police force, the Chief Constable in Inverness and all the rest of it. And, the little chit-chat and a cup of coffee and a biscuit before we get down to business. And the Chief Constable said to John Farquhar Munro, "How's your summer been?" And John Farquhar said, he said, "I was in the Highlands and I thought I saw a river was looking awfully nice. Had a wee rod hidden in the back of the car, and I took it out, the cast to fly." He was poaching. He was telling us about his poaching in front of the Chief Constable. And the police looked embarrassed and looked at their shoes and said, "Yes, well, let's get down to business now, shall we?" I couldn't believe it. I was going to be arrested on the spot.
Yeah. Oh, well, I still think you have a well-developed system of lairds up there, don't you?
Yes.
They're like Africa, where there are kings all over the place.
Yes. He was dearly loved, John Farquhar Munro.
Mm.
He was such fun. He was absolutely hilarious.
People like characters in politics, don't they? Perhaps that's why Johnson got in. I don't know that many people respect him, but they do like a character.
Yeah, they do. Yes. A bit different.
Yeah. Can we just go back to some of your briefs, if that's okay, Jamie? And the defence one is interesting, because the Defence Secretary is a Preston MP, Ben Wallace. So where do you see, with the government being quite isolationist at the moment? Certainly, we've had lots of stuff, even in the last few days, about international agreements not really caring about. How does the global position of Britain look at the moment in terms of our defence strategy?
That's extremely worrying. The actual fact is we rely on our partnerships in various ways in various parts of the world. Take Novichok. I think it was the Dutch intelligence service that actually, made the connection with Russia and gave us the information we needed. And it is a sad thing, but there are elements out there who do not wish the UK well and will do us harm if they can. And international cooperation is absolutely crucial. And this has been like this for a very long time in history. If you think about how Napoleon was beaten, it was because the UK got together a coalition of forces to which eventually, stopped him, the tyrant, if you like. And you look at the Second World War and how we work with other countries and so on. And what I find very, very worrying is as we all know, as good liberals, is the little Englandism, which is so utterly dangerous and irresponsible. And also, one thing I've been working on ever since the beginning is there's a group of MPs from all parties who are very keen that the next generation aircraft is built by a consortium, but a consortium that involves the UK, because in buying the F-35 from the Americans, they're great planes and so on, but we will never have all the intellectual knowledge as to how that aeroplane works. They won't tell us everything because it's not probably a good idea business-wise to do that. And there is the story, which I think is not apocryphal, about at the beginning of the Falklands War, that we couldn't get the Sidewinder missiles to work properly. And that the Americans said, there's one thing you didn't know, but we'll tell you now, and you have to pay for it. And then they work properly. So, but the point about building this aircraft is we will depend on, along with Britain, working with other countries. One thing is Germany, you think France. We were thinking outside the box, thinking maybe Japan, maybe South Korea, something like that. And again, it's about the relationship with those countries. And, I read with horror today in the Times Boris's games. Luckily, it does seem that some conservatives are saying, hang on, this is going too far. But the guy seems, and I'm not going to mince my words, completely and utterly bonkers to, think a no deal is going to be any good at all, and to annoy negotiating partners as much as he had, because that will have a knock-on effect in our relationship in the future. Sorry, it's a long answer, but I feel very strongly.
Fascinating.
Let's take it to another stage then. There's a lot of discussion on Twitter, which isn't always particularly representative of anyone's opinion, about Ed's stand on the Europe issue, the EU rejoining, etc. issue. Is Ed taking the right stand? And are we 100% clear, because I'm not, what that stand actually is?
Well, my understanding is that Ed is an unreconstructed pro-European, and so am I. I'm partly Swiss-French in the blood in my veins. I'm partly Irish from County Tipperary, etc. And I think what he's saying is, if I understand him rightly, is we keep the candle burning. And when we get through this folly and realize just how big the folly is, that we keep the door ajar to say, actually, we're going to eat humble pie. We've got this wrong. We want to rejoin. And that's something I will continue to argue for as long as there's breath in my body, because it is the longest period of peace we've had in Europe. The EC's got a great deal to do with that. And the bottom line is that my grandfather, his two brothers, Walter and Arthur, were killed on the Western Front. Same with German families. They lost loved ones. Same with anyone who dies in war. So I think the EC, it's great, fantastic gift to the world is peace and prosperity and men and women of all countries and colours of skin getting on and working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very well said. Can I bring you now onto your new portfolio, which is, and I'm interested in terms of, obviously there's been a great deal of interest in the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Now, in terms of culture, I mean, to tell you where I am, I'm on a local board for my local rugby club. That's my passion. I love my local rugby club.
That's culture.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Is that culture?
Yeah, it's definitely sport.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What do we need something to help revitalise the culture and sport at a grassroots and community level? Because the big ticket items, so Premier League football, Premier Rugby, the Ashes, they can survive with TV money. But do we need something to help these clubs that do wonderful work in the community, help getting, whether it's antisocial behaviour issues, whether it's mental health issues, just people being able to get involved and enjoying sport? What that must be the big ticket on your portfolio now, how we get that sport back.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the little sadnesses, you mentioned the fact I've been a panto dame. And that's because in my hometown of Tain, where the Glenmorangie is made, another plug, I'm quite mercenary. The thing is that I was talking to one of the cast who I used to act with for a number of years, And of course, there's no panto this year. They would have started rehearsing by now, running up to Christmas. And you think when you've got 60-something children on stage in the chorus, you've got all the people, all the wider community, and there's everybody on stage in my little panto, from the local lawyer, sister, to people who work for the council, to people, single mums, all sorts of people. And what a hole that is in people's lives. For the dark months of all those rehearsals, which everyone loves, that's gone. So to answer your question, I think that what we need to do is start to demonstrate, and this probably is my job from the grassroots up, just how important sport and culture are, what a difference it makes to our lives, how it can give kids, confidence the way they might never get any other way. And I think as you build it up, I'm going to tend to talk about this a lot in the chamber. And then you start to make the case that there has to be some sort of recognition of how the health of the nation is actually improved through all this, how the happiness, the well-being of the nation, and you mentioned mental health, absolutely. And I think you then have to make the case to the Treasury to say that in the scheme of things, it's not, it's only going to be 2 or 3 F-35s, the cost of them, but if you were to direct the funds in the right way and at the right level of the community, you really could do things. And actually, there is an argument. We just talked about music and how music enrich lives. I was involved in a debate some years ago when I was a councillor about free instrument tuition. And there was quite a clever argument said that young people who are learning a musical instrument, it actually helped their other academic performance, which is, I thought, absolutely fascinating. So I think there is something to be said that people will achieve if they're happy. They're happy in their minds, they will actually do better. If you're stressed, it's not so easy to do the crossword, is it? If you're stressed, you don't perform as well. So that is really where I think the health of the nation, but that can lead to the prosperity and can be actually good for the economy in the long run.
Yeah, I think if you were to pop along the corridor to the old folks' end, i.e. the House of Lords, and see Mike's story, when he was leader of Liverpool Council, we became European Capital of Culture. That kick-started a huge change in our economy, without which we'd be in serious trouble now. So I think people tell me, culture or sport, it's either football hooligans or fat ladies singing. In fact, culture and sport is all about our communities. And the other side I'm particularly interested in, so you'll be getting some stuff from me, I regret to tell you, is about things like sport, things like music, and mental health. We're going to have huge mental health problems, and we can either find psychiatrists for them, we haven't got enough, give them pills, and they're very expensive, or we can involve them in things like music and sport, which are very relatively cheap to do, and will stop what I'm sure is a mental health tsunami, which is going to hit us otherwise. So you and Munira and people like me at the LGA and my colleagues ought to be working together, presenting culture and sport in a very different way.
Yeah. I mean, remember this, you've got a blank sheet of paper with me. The whole phone call from Ed was a surprise, but the blank sheet of paper means that I'm really, really happy for people like you and everyone out there to say, Jamie, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Absolutely, because that in itself is creative. And second anecdote, when I was a student, I was having a pint of beer with a mate of mine in St Andrews, and we walked down North Street, never forgotten it, and there was a sign against a little hall said, auditions now for Samuel Beckett's Endgame. And we'd had a couple of drinks, and he said, oh gosh, that lot, they're called the Mermaids, it's the Drama Society, they paint their fingernails, they're a bit weird, and so on. So, and because we'd had a few drinks, we went in an audition for a laugh. Two drunk, yobbos like us, and blow me down, I got a part. And that, I'd never done anything like that at school. I wouldn't have gone near the bar. So when I did it, I was totally bitten, and it kind of enriched my student days by accident. And so, sorry, I always digress. Bring me back to the point.
Isn't part of performing? I mean, I go down to the town hall and then I perform a role as the group leader and leader of the opposition. Mm-hmm. You must do that in the chamber. You do that in public meetings. And actually, that's the other thing, is how good the arts are are preparing people for the real world.
Yes, you're so right. I did the same when I was a counsellor. Yep, and it teaches you how to pause. And what I find very interesting, watching Boris, I think increasingly floundering question at PMQs, is how he doesn't have a feel for it at all. And I find that, and the more I know of Boris, the more I've seen him over the last years, I've decided that the press persona, the jovial chap, slap you on the back and all the rest of it, is actually completely and utterly different to the truth. It's a real surprise, actually. And I'm amazed he's got this far without those, the ability to take, go with a laugh, or to pause and come back with a riposte, a good one. Instead, he looks angry and petulant, and it's odd, very odd.
And it kind of links in, we were talking about the cultures, how important, I know your area is particularly in need of tourism, for example, and all things about culture and arts. Whatever's going to happen with Brexit, whether it's no deal, whatever, I do sometimes get frustrated that there is a kind of snobbery, like we've kind of hinted at, against culture and art and sport, when actually it's a massive economic boon for this country as well. And whereas we might have days debating fishing, which is relatively small, I know fishing obviously will still be key in your patch as well, but compared to the culture sector of our society, it's dwarfed by it. It's huge.
Yeah, and as I said, go back to my pantomime, if you get it right, it can reach out into all sorts of homes who'd never think of doing it. And I think actually involving children is quite a clever way. As I say, 60 kids, mostly from primary school, some from secondary school, on the stage, reaches into homes and backgrounds right across the spectrum. And then they get bitten in turn, like I was with Samuel Beckett's Endgame. There's a little bit of the thespian in us all, if you can just get it out there,
Let's take you home now. Let's go. We have to talk about Scottish issues. Okay, so you have been virtually at every level of government now, Jamie. You from council back in the 80s, right the way through now to Westminster. You have kind of experienced it all. Where do you see politics in Scotland at the moment?
Well, okay. The first thing is that there is a perception in Scotland that Nicola Sturgeon has done a better job than Boris through the pandemic. But that's a perception. But if you look at the record, it's not so. The fact that the disease spread into the care homes, there was a particularly bad case in Skye, shows the faults. And I think it's because Nicola's presentation skills are better than Boris's. There is a lot of the ominous storm warnings that a second referendum could go the other way. I'm actually not sure about that. I'm not getting it on the ground. Okay, my own vote went up by a few hundred in December, but I nearly lost the seat because the SNP, Johnny nearly got it back. I've got the fifth tightest seat in Britain. But that was partly due, I think, to a Labour collapse, and the Tory vote went down. But I don't quite understand what happened there. But I'm not getting it on the ground. And I think that you actually say yes or no to independence, and there's no currency, there's now no oil money, and I don't think it's going to work. But I could be wrong, and it's not what they're talking about in on the streets, to tell you the truth. So I think that, firstly, can I just say, I think Willie Rennie has done an absolutely fabulous job as leader, and I hope he carries on as leader. He's inspirational. He has a sort of a Kennedy-esque ability to connect people. Now, the fact is that my seat for the Scottish elections is probably going to be our number one target seat. And
we've already spoken to Molly Nolan, which is
Molly Nolan. Yeah, Molly's very, very good indeed. And I mean, I think to do what she did to get to Harvard, but off her own bat without any leg up at all, is a major achievement. And she's very, very bright. She's good with it. So there is a chance we can win the seat. And I think the stats show that we should take more seats on the list system as well. So I think that liberalism is alive and is getting stronger in Scotland. And we've got a by-election coming up on the shores of Loch Ness. We have a potentially very, very good candidate, a young lady who's only 21, but I think she's going to run. And even if she doesn't make it this time in the by-election, because that's like a two-horse race, well, it's first past the post, effectively, come the council elections in 18 months' time, she's every hope of getting in. In fact, I think she probably will. So Labour are completely and utterly in the doldrums. Their leader, Richard Leonard, I think it's only a matter of time before he goes. Douglas Ross is competent in leading the Conservatives. He has, however, since becoming leader, made a couple of gaffes, and to go to a football match on VJ Day was not really very clever, and it did annoy soldiers and ex-services personnel, and I heard it at home. So we shall see what happens, but I would say our trump card is Willie, who really is, and because he's been doing the job for quite a long while, he's actually made his mark, and people recognise him in the street when he comes up to Tain, my hometown, where they make Glenmorangie. No, I won't say it anymore. They know who he is. Oh, it's you, Mr. Wren. It's you, Willie. What else would I say? I think we've got to be very careful that Westminster is not made to seem any more remote. And just another point about Boris, I was stunned at how badly he handled the camping in the Highlands bit. The story appeared in the Mail. I was actually the Public of Ireland, but there was the front page of the Daily Mail, which I bought in Donegal. And then the following day, he'd done a bunk. He'd gone, leaving his security people to take down the tent. That was so totally wrong. What he should have done was to have rung up BBC Inverness, Radio Highland, Murray Firth Radio, the Rochester Journal, the Preston Journal, the Caithness Courier, and said, the Prime Minister is going to give a press conference at 10 o'clock at the gate of the field where he's his little holiday cottage. He could have gone up there and said, I'm here, I love the Highlands, it's great, I love Scotland, I think it's a great partnership in the UK, I don't mind the Midges, and I'm coming back next year. Now I can have a little bit of peace time. I'm actually wants a bit of rest time with Carrie, my girlfriend, and my little son. He didn't do that. How stupid can you get? And he could have had a good news story. And frankly, the Rochester Journal, which is where he was in Rochester Comedy, would have given their eye teeth for an interview with the Prime Minister. It would have been a historic first. Silly boy. So
and again, that's what you said before.
He's at the cottage, but was he in that tent? Because it didn't look very used.
God knows.
I thought you had local knowledge to tell us.
I know. I tweeted at the time that if it was the midges that was troubling him, he should try smearing porridge on the bits that are bitten. But
I must remember my daughter lives up on an island called Scalpe, which is off the
island. Yes.
And it's bloody awful in the summer. If it's a good day, they have to hope it's windy. Otherwise, the midges get them.
Scalpe is bad.
Why don't you come more often, Dad?
But what I'm saying is the London-centric view is quite dangerous. Not just for Scotland, but for, I think, the Red Wall seats. I think if they don't deliver, those seats will go back to Labour. And it's why, if you go down the West Country, people say, oh, London, they don't really understand. And that's where, we as a party, we can start to make inroads again.
And do you think Labour's troubles in Scotland? Because I went through all the elections in Caithness, Sutherland, and Easter Ross, and actually we had our best results when actually the vote was almost split between SNP and Labour. That they almost knocked each other out. So I mean, are we almost a little bit too gleeful about Labour's troubles in Scotland? Or because in the end, if Labour collapsed, then we've seen what nationalism has taken its place. Or is that me just getting the wrong take from it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that I have a great respect for the Labour vote. Most people who worked on the railways in the Highlands are Labour voters, and their fathers and their grandfathers before them, and you can understand why, actually. And I think that we need a strengthening of Labour in Scotland, and it'll do no bad thing at all. It will help us to do it exactly for the reasons you say. And do you know something? Every time I see Keir Starmer score one over Boris, I do rejoice. I think, well done, Keir. It's nice to see that happening because I'm not Labour. I'm a Liberal, of course I am. But I think that my own view is that we ought to look to try and work with Labour where we can and be part of a radical alternative to a Tory and a very right-wing Tory government at the moment. And therefore, my conversations with Labour members across the gangway, if you like, are cordial. And I did the Armed Forces scheme last year, I did the Royal Air Force one, I'm doing the Navy one this year. And when you do that, you get to know some members very well indeed in other parties. So the member for Caerphilly, Wayne David, is a friend. Luke Graham down, Plymouth Way is a friend. So you get to know them. And I wish them well. I think it would be a disaster if the Labour completely collapsed in Scotland, because then I think we probably will end up with independence if we're not damn careful. And that would be tragic, really, because I'm a liberal. I believe in international cooperation, not splitting up countries, not splitting up, allies from each other and friendships and ruining them.
One of the things that John and I often discuss, though, going back to our own areas, is that it's very well to have a nice relationship with nice chaps in Parliament, although I wouldn't say that would include any of the Labour MPs for Liverpool at the moment. But we look at the Labour Party in Liverpool or Preston, and I've done quite a bit of work with local government in Scotland, and the Labour Party are not people that I could ever contemplate working with at anything more than a crisis or superficial level in a place like Liverpool, because at the end of the day, you got it right. They ain't liberals and they behave in a very illiberal way. So is there going to be something happening in Westminster which John and I are going to say, oh, well, the buggers are at it, we'll have to go with it, and sort of suck it and stay in Liverpool?
Yeah, I think, well, let's see what happens, but I think it's a very good point. I mean, put it this way, Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott have never passed the time of day with me, because I'm a liberal and I'm therefore regarded as extremely dangerous and the enemy. And you're dead right. That tendency, and I only have to say Derek Hatton, to send a thrill down many's a spine up your way. I think we just have to suck it and see how it plays. Early days. Eddie's now confirmed in the position. Keir he's got his problems still, but we'll see what happens. I was talking to Dick Newby, leader of the Lords, coming in this morning, walking in, and he says, Jamie, the best thing you can do is just keep the conversations up, relay the information to Ed and to me in the Lords and so on, and that's what I'll do. Suck it and see. And yes, I mean, when I was a member of the Scottish Parliament, I had my second election in 2003 was a rough one, and Labour were out to get me. And, I remember even when I was an MP, you go on the telly and suddenly they'd turn their guns on the Lib Dem. So you have to watch yourself, for sure. But you're dead right. They're not liberal or an awful. Some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are.
But and in the old days, back in Asquith's time, would have been in our party, but not now.
Very briefly talk about, your constituency is so huge. A lot of us had the joys of the Brecon and Radnorshire by-election last year, and and huge areas like Tim Farron's South Lakes patch as well. What is it like being an MP for such a huge area? What kind of organisation challenges does that present to you?
Well, the driving is vast. I have to be in the car a massive amount of the time, and I have to really try and cover it, because people, in normal circumstances, they expect to see their MP, and they expect you to hold clinics and so on. And what is interesting is that it's different bits are very different. Caithness is sort of more like Orkney and Shetland. It's more Viking. Caithness people are very blunt in a sort of Yorkshire way. And if you're canvassing, in the Caithness dialect, they say, you can go till hell. Which I'm not giving you a vote. You're right, okay. Whereas in Sutherland, in the North Coast, round about Tongue or Betty Hill, they're more reserved, because I think it comes from the Gaelic culture. And on the doorstep, I've had ladies say to me, or men say, yes, well, thank you for calling. I'm sure you'll do very well, which is code for I'm not voting for. And I've seen people, up from the south, no offence to you good people, but get it wrong and not read them. You have to read them, absolutely. But it's a fantastically beautiful constituency. I didn't expect to be an MP. It's an incredible privilege to represent your hometown where I was born and brought up, went to school, and so on. And as you know, there's not a day I don't walk in across the Lambeth Bridge and towards the palace and think, Jamie Stone, you are a lucky lad. But I think the zigzag nature of my career, the fact I was a councillor for Yonks, stood for Scottish Parliament, got in, did 3 terms, stood down, then became a councillor again. It's the oddest graph you've ever seen. It's very eccentric. A bit like the jobs I used to do in the past, like gutting fish or, that sort of thing. But that does help. And I remember when I first stood for Scottish Parliament, knocking doors in Wick and Caithness, and several times people said, "Oh, I remember you from the yard when we built the Conoco platform." And thank God I did do a variety of odd jobs. A lot of my contemporaries were going off and becoming barristers or chartered accountants or whatever. I was just working on a building site, and that oddly enough, my father, who is a wise man, said, "It'll do you no harm, lad. It'll knock the corners off you." And by God, he was right.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's an opportunity there to say something that comes from the town you live in. Very unusual for you, Jamie. What is it? Is a famous product from your area?
Oh, well, it's a whiskey you may not have heard of.
If they want to sponsor this pod, they can start paying some money.
I was brought up in a little farm, tiny little dairy farm, very small one, beside the distillery, okay? And my dad used to go and get the husks of the barley, the leftover stuff, which is called draff. And he was always very good form when he came back with his tractor and trailer, but that's because they give you half a mug of the white spirit straight out of the still. Yes, I don't know how he ever got the stuff back.
Well, I suppose the only other question we've had is actually, will Jamie Stone be going to space? Is the answer, because obviously for those that don't know, the UK spaceport is due to be in your constituency as well. How was that decision came out? How do you even deal with, right, suddenly there's going to be a space industry in my constituency?
It is completely astonishing. I didn't know about this until I got into Westminster, and then Joe Johnson was the space minister, and he suddenly said to me in a lobby, "You need to know about this." And I said, "Sorry, what? And the reason it's because it's up that far north. It's because it's on the position of the curvature of the Earth, which is the shortest route to where you want to put geostationary satellites. It's also got a rail link at Thurso nearby. But it's very, very exciting. The locals are really for it big time, because along the coast of it, we had Dunray, we have UK's first nuclear reactor, which is now being decommissioned. And there's a lot of jobs there who are looking over the shoulders thinking, when is my P45 coming? What am I going to do next? And whatever you feel about nuclear power, whatever you feel about building oil rigs at Nig down the south of my constituency, the point was these industries did halt the depopulation of the Highlands, because for many, 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 many years indeed, since the 18th century, you could say, the saddest export from the Highlands was the people going through the clearances or just leaving to go to the Americas, to Australia, Antipodes, whatever. And that halted it. And it meant that people stayed, they brought up their families, and that is why the spaceport is such a scene. Okay, it's only, perhaps maybe 100 jobs, something like that, but something can grow from that. The problem we have is there's a Danish man who has been buying up all the estates around there, and he's now Britain's biggest landowner. He's trying to stop the whole thing, and he's doing everything in his power to stop it. And he's now going to go for a judicial review on the planning consent that's just been given. He won't win that, but it's too bad that this bloke is doing this sort of stuff. And he really annoys me. He furloughed all his staff on his many estates he owns. And he didn't need to do that because people work outdoors, still got stuff to do. He then didn't pay them the 20% on top, and he's a billionaire. Now, one of the tabloids, I think it was the Mirror, did him over for it, by April. Good thing too. It was, cheap behaviour. And just to get a bit passionate about this, I think sooner or later, when I know I've got parliamentary privilege, I'm going to just talk a little bit about him, because this guy can't get away with this stuff. It's not in the spirit. It's not in the spirit of what the Treasury extended the hand of furlough, if you like. I think Rishi should be pretty fed up about that sort of behaviour.
Sounds like the clearances all over again, in a way. A rich landowner using assets for their own use.
Yeah, I mean, I had a clinic in a place called Melness, which is up on the north coast, and only a few days ago, about 3 weeks ago, and a woman came to see me and said, yes, and she told me what her problem was. She also said, I said, where do you live? She said, well, we used to live at Hope. Now, Hope is further along. And I said, oh, you worked on the Hope estate? Yes, my husband and I both worked on the estate. And I said, you're still working there? And she looked awkward and said, no, there's nobody working on the Hope estate. And I said, so did the Dane who owns it, did he make you redundant? And she looked really awkward and said, I'm very sorry, I can't talk anymore. We've signed a non-disclosure agreement. I thought, oh, for God's sake, you get this check contingent on you saying nothing. I mean, it's lovely, the idea of wilding things, yeah, but not when you get rid of all the locals. And he doesn't own the local crofters. It is like the clearances. And I'm sorry, I think it stinks. I'm really angry about it. And as long as I breathe, I think mockery is the best bet. I think I'll do a take-off to the Dani man. At the height, when he got the bad publicity in the Mirror, he said he was going to give a free hot meal to all the children on his estate. Wow.
Well, I think that just highlights some of the, we've talked about huge issues, whether it's Brexit, international, but also the fantastic work our Lib Dem MPs do in their constituents. Most of this stuff will never hit headlines, will never be things, but actually you are being the safety net and the barrier and the champion for your areas. So I'm sure on behalf of everyone, just thank you very much for all your hard work, Jamie, as well.
It's a pleasure. It's an honour and a privilege to do what I do. It's something I never expected in my life, and I enjoy it hugely. But I'm keenly aware that I have a responsibility to all my constituents, no matter what, to do my very best.
Sadly, too many people in politics at all levels don't think it is an honour and a privilege to be an elected representative, because that's what I say. They think it's their right or their stepping stone to do something else, and they see it as a minor career move. That's not what a Liberal does at any level, in my experience.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. And because we're Lib Dems, I think we have to pedal that much harder to win our seat in the first place and to keep it. Sadly, apart from Orkney and Shetland, there aren't really any yellow chip council wards or constituencies, are there? Really, we have to work hard.
Yeah.
And of course, if you want to help out the campaign in Molly Nolan's campaigning, please do go help the Scottish Lib Dems. They've got phone banks, they've got everything. So you, by all means, help out, because they do have a massive geographical area to cover, and I'm sure any help, money, anything like that will be very much appreciated by the Scottish Lib Dems in what could be an absolute defining election next year. Yeah. And I suppose for me and Richard, I just want to say thank you very much, Jamie, just for coming on the podcast. You can follow Jamie and all his legions of Twitter fans at Jamie Funorth. You can follow Richard at Councillor Kemp, and you can follow myself at John Potter LD, and you can follow everything to do with the Lib Dem Podcast at LibDem Pod. But it's been a real pleasure to have you, Jamie. Thank you so much for taking the time. Do have a good rest of your day in Westminster. And to all our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for tuning in, downloading and watching this episode. We'll be back with loads more stuff, including episodes about how you can campaign at the moment without canvassing. We've got lots of interviews coming up. Looks like we're going to have Manira Wilson coming on the podcast very soon as well. So this is a fantastic that you all watch us and view us, and stay tuned, because we'll be back with another episode very soon.